When my mother-in-law was asked if I would be preparing the New Year's meal, her immediate response was a dramatic wave of her hands and a burst of laughter. "Absolutely not. That's impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook to save her life," she exclaimed. She called me the hopeless housewife who couldn't even pull off a New Year's feast, proudly declaring that she was the one in charge of the kitchen. Her laughter was more than just annoying. It was an outright insult. After enduring this for so long, I knew it was time for me to speak up. My name is Natalie, I'm 29, and I got married last year. Being a full-time housewife, I enjoy cooking, and thankfully my husband isn't too picky. Anything edible seems to work for him. He's a kind man, and we live in a lovely, newly renovated home with a dream kitchen that has a large island. It should have been an ideal setup from the start, but there's been a constant issue: my mother-in-law. She prides herself on her culinary skills and views me as a total letdown in the kitchen. What's worse, she doesn't keep these opinions to herself. She broadcasts them. Just the other day, she was gossiping loudly with the neighbor's wife, making sure her voice carried as I was outside doing laundry. My daughter-in-law can't even cook properly. It's dreadful. I wonder about her upbringing. My poor son. So unfortunate to be stuck with her, she lamented, each word stabbing at me like thorns. It was tough enough to swallow her critiques about my cooking, but to hear her belittle my family was downright unacceptable. I realized I couldn't let this go on any longer. It was time to take a stand. I've always held my parents in high regard, cherishing the numerous lessons they've imparted to me. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law never took the time to understand or appreciate these values. Instead, she chose to badmouth me regularly. Today was just another episode in her ongoing series of critiques. Her biting remarks echoed through the neighborhood. She doesn't even know how to season properly. If I don't cook, there's no flavor at all. Why did my son have to marry someone like her? The neighbors chimed in, fueling the fire with their jabs, suggesting my husband Daniel had bitten off more than he could chew, and pondering why she didn't just teach me herself. Under my breath, I wished they would all just stop. My hand clenched a glass so tightly it cracked. That evening, when my husband Daniel came home and my mother-in-law was conveniently in the shower, I saw my chance to finally let everything out. "Can't you do something about your mother? She's going around the neighborhood every day making me out to be some hopeless cook," I pleaded with Daniel as I took his jacket. Opening up about my mother-in-law's relentless behavior felt necessary. Daniel isn't particularly close to his mother, and he genuinely cares about me, so I anticipated his support, maybe even expecting him to defend me or at least acknowledge the strain her words were causing me, but his reaction caught me off guard. "Well, Mom has always been very particular about cooking," he said, scratching his head, looking genuinely troubled. The word particular hung in the air, so light for such a heavy accusation. I almost countered with a remark about her overpowering seasoning, but held back, staring at him in disbelief, wondering if he truly understood the impact of his mother's words. I stared at Daniel in utter disbelief. "Come on, she's a good cook, right?" he asked nonchalantly. "Well, I don't know much about good or bad cooking anyway. Please just try to get along with Mom. That's what a wife is supposed to do, isn't it?" With those words, he left the room, leaving me stunned. Was this some kind of joke? The thoughts echoed in my mind. A good cook? A wife's duty? What does that even mean? A wave of frustration surged through me all at once. Although I hate to admit it, my mother-in-law's cooking is far from delightful. She has monopolized the kitchen for the past year, ostensibly to spare me the effort, but I've never actually enjoyed her meals. She firmly believes that piling on the spices equates to better flavor. Daniel, raised on that robust taste, always finishes his plate without a word of complaint, but I find it a daily struggle. Eating such heavily spiced food is not only unpleasant, but I fear it might be ruining my palate and isn't great for my health. Each mealtime has become a silent battle. finishing my portion out of fear of the consequences of leaving any behind. Alone in the quiet of our bedroom, I let out a heavy sigh. The real shock wasn't that Daniel failed to criticize his mother's cooking style. It was that he didn't seem to take my feelings seriously. In moments like these, I found myself missing the familiar, comforting meals of my parents' home. As the year's end approached, so did the anticipation for the New Year's celebrations. This would be my first New Year since marrying into this family, a time traditionally marked by a large gathering and a feast prepared by my mother-in-law. The thought didn't fill me with joy, but with a sense of dread, pondering how I would navigate the familial expectations and the overpowering flavors that were now a regular part of my life. When Daniel casually mentioned that it was customary for the family to gather and enjoy the feast prepared by his mother for New Year's, I couldn't help but silently question the tradition. However, outwardly, I only managed an O. It seemed that the relatives who eagerly attended each year had grown to love her cooking, or perhaps they had simply become accustomed to it. Despite feeling a bit of sympathy for them, I couldn't shake off the feeling of slight dread. Despite the frequent critiques from my mother-in-law about my supposedly bland culinary skills, my parents instilled a strong confidence in my cooking abilities. I secretly longed to cook for everyone and maybe even introduce some subtler flavors to Daniel's palate. With a newfound resolve, I decided it was time to discuss the New Year's feast with my mother-in-law. As she bustled around the kitchen, pulling out large plates and pots, I seized the moment. "I'd like to help with the New Year's feast," I ventured as she energetically prepared for the upcoming celebration. Turning to face me, her expression was one of immediate dismissal. "Natalie, you can't even cook properly. How can you prepare food for the New Year's celebration? We'll have not just our family, but all the relatives over. You know that, right?" she retorted. "But I'm part of this family now. It's my duty as a wife to contribute," I argued, my voice tinged with desperation. She simply shook her head. "Do you want to create an awkward atmosphere at the start of the new year? Everyone comes expecting my cooking. We can't disappoint them. Please, if you understand, don't interfere." Frustration bubbled inside me as I watched her turn back to her preparations, effectively shutting down my offer to help. The new year arrived, and with it, the house filled with about 20 relatives, more than I had anticipated, many of whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. As each guest arrived, I greeted them warmly, ushering them into the spacious dining room that had once awed me when I first moved in. The unusually large room was buzzing, perfectly suited for such gatherings. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was already deep in conversation with the arriving relatives, the center of attention in the kitchen and the heart of the celebration. During the festive preparations, a relative curiously inquired, "By the way, is Natalie preparing the feast this year?" My mother-in-law quickly waved her hands dismissively and laughed. "That's impossible! My daughter-in-law can't cook at all. She's a hopeless housewife who can't even manage a New Year's feast. I handle all the cooking around here," she declared, her laughter sounding harsh and unwelcoming. It was not a joke or a casual remark. It was a pointed insult directed at me. At that moment, I reached my breaking point. "Mother-in-law, please let me prepare the New Year's feast this time. If it doesn't turn out well, you can always make a palate cleansing dish," I suggested, breaking the tense silence that ensued. After a brief pause, the room began to buzz with whispers from the relatives. "Well, I certainly don't want a disappointing meal, but they say practice makes perfect, right?" My mother-in-law conceded reluctantly, sensing the shifting tide of opinion among the relatives in favor of giving me a chance. "All right, fine. If it doesn't work out, Frida can step in," she added. "Very well then, Natalie, you can take the reign this year," she stated, her words tinged with reluctance. "But remember, I can always step in. Ladies and gentlemen, indulge this hopeless housewife's whims for once," she announced with a tone of patronization. With a heart swelling with pride and determination, I was ready to showcase my cooking skills to everyone. It was my chance to change everyone's perceptions. I poured my heart into preparing the meal, and as the beautifully arranged feast was placed on the large platter, exclamations of admiration filled the room from our relatives. "Wow, the meal turned out perfectly. It looks delicious. Well done, Natalie. This isn't something just anyone could pull off," they praised enthusiastically. Amidst such acclaim, my mother-in-law, who had just returned from shopping for the so-called palate cleansing dish, glanced at my spread. "It looks all right, I suppose, but it's probably bland," she remarked, emphasizing the word probably and clearly reluctant to acknowledge the success. Ignoring her comments, I busied myself distributing paper plates and forks to the relatives, encouraging them to enjoy the meal. As my mother-in-law hurried into the kitchen to start on what she called the palate cleansing dish, she kept a watchful eye over us, probably expecting her need to intervene. The relatives tentatively began sampling the dishes I had prepared. A murmur of approval started to build. My mother-in-law, not missing a beat, chuckled with apparent satisfaction, announcing loudly, "See, I told you this is why she's the incompetent daughter-in-law. Everyone, you don't need to force yourselves. I'll prepare the palate cleansing dish right away." Her tone carried a triumphant note, expecting to salvage what she assumed would be a culinary disaster. However, her satisfaction was quickly overshadowed by sounds of genuine delight from the dining room. "This is the first time I've tasted New Year's food this delicious. It's like something from a fancy hotel. Natalie, where did you learn to cook like this?" exclaimed one of the relatives, their praise filling the room with energy. Amidst the lively crowd, my mother-in-law stood, momentarily stunned into silence by the unexpected approval. With everyone's attention now on me and none on her, I felt a surge of confidence and decided it was the perfect moment to reveal my background. I grew up in a family deeply passionate about food. My family owns a renowned French restaurant, celebrated for its authentic cuisine and even recognized in the Michelin Guide. My father is the fifth generation overseeing culinary operations, and my mother, from a long lineage of chefs, supports him wholeheartedly. From a young age, I absorbed the art of cooking by observing my parents. By the time I was in upper elementary school, I was earnestly learning from them. Though my brother is poised to inherit the restaurant, the culinary knowledge passed down from my parents remains a deep source of pride within me. This revelation shifted the atmosphere further, cementing my newfound respect among the relatives and leaving my mother-in-law to ponder the unexpected turn of events. As the room buzzed with impressed relatives, I felt a profound connection to my heritage, proud to finally share my true culinary roots. That's why I found it impossible to tolerate my mother-in-law's dismissive remarks and actions that seemed to undermine my culinary skills. To her, dismissing my cooking was akin to denying my parents' legacy and the restaurant that had been a cornerstone of our family for generations. I had mentioned this before I got married, but it seemed lost on her. My mother-in-law, often condescending, seemed to see me merely as the daughter from a quaint countryside restaurant. Daniel, largely indifferent to culinary nuances, probably couldn't tell the difference between a family-run establishment and authentic French cuisine. I sometimes found myself questioning why I married into this family, a thought that I muttered under my breath as I turned to the sound of someone calling my name. Meeting the gaze of several pairs of expectant eyes, I heard, "Can we have seconds? I want more too." Despite the generous portions I had prepared, everything had been completely devoured. A wave of happiness washed over me, and I felt tears welling up. Receiving praise for my cooking should have been routine, something I had known before getting married. Yet, over the past year, I seem to have forgotten that sensation entirely. "Yes, I'll prepare more right away," I declared with renewed determination. As I hurried out of the room, I passed by my motionless mother-in-law. She had, after all, brought some ingredients regardless of her earlier criticisms. "Mother-in-law, I'll use these ingredients, okay?" I announced, but received no reply. The groceries remained untouched in the kitchen. As I reached to inspect the contents of the supermarket bag, someone entered the kitchen. Could you teach us how to cook too?" I glanced up to find 4 women lined up before me, their ages ranging from around mine to about that of my mother-in-law's. This unexpected request bolstered my confidence further. Here was an opportunity not just to share my heritage, but also to foster a bond over the love of cooking, transcending generational and family boundaries. It was a moment of validation and a chance to demonstrate the depth of my skills and the rich culinary legacy I carried. As I looked into their eyes, each gleamed with the same eager curiosity. "The food was amazing. We'd love to learn from you," they enthused. Hearing those words ignited something within me. I had never considered teaching cooking before, but witnessing their admiration and realizing the impact I could make, a newfound desire to share my knowledge welled up inside me. With a smile, I gladly agreed to teach them, and the room erupted with excitement. The group began to chat animatedly about how they would impress their husbands by honing their cooking skills. Thus began an impromptu cooking class. From a distance, my mother-in-law watched us intently, her expression unreadable as she silently tidied up. As we concluded the class and the dishes were served, they were met with enthusiastic praise. I must admit, Grace's cooking can be a bit too salty for my taste. Natalie's dishes, on the other hand, are delicate and refined, truly professional French cuisine. Jennifer, one of the participants, beamed with joy at the recognition from everyone. Feeling a mix of pride and unease, I offered a faint smile to my mother-in-law, but she remained focused on cleaning, undisturbed by the ongoing praises. Just as I pondered how to ease the tension, Daniel stepped in with a decisive statement. "I actually prefer Natalie's cooking. Mom's strong flavors have always made me concerned about salt and health. Going forward, Natalie should handle the cooking regularly." Those words seemed to take my mother-in-law completely by surprise, and before long, she quietly withdrew to her room. The news of my culinary abilities spread quickly among my relatives, marking a significant shift in how they viewed me and my place in the family. This unexpected turn of events not only bolstered my confidence, but also subtly shifted the household dynamics in a way I had not anticipated. As word of my culinary talent spread, I soon found myself receiving requests to teach cooking classes. Initially hesitant, I remembered the joy from the impromptu New Year's cooking session and decided to embrace the opportunity. People genuinely valued my skills, and through word of mouth, my reputation as a skilled chef of authentic French cuisine grew quickly. Before I knew it, I was featured in media outlets and celebrated as a housewife renowned for her cooking. Requests for my classes started coming from all over the country. Life, I learned, is wonderfully unpredictable. This unexpected journey even led to a feature about me in a prominent cooking magazine. In the article, I spoke about my culinary heritage and my father's influence on my skills. As for my mother-in-law, who had once spread less than flattering rumors about my cooking abilities, she ceased commenting on culinary matters altogether after the shift in family and public opinion. Over time, she gradually stopped cooking altogether, leaving me with full responsibility for meals in our home. Despite the increased busyness, we now live together peacefully, a significant change from our earlier days.